Welcome to Legends of Kansas, where I travel to some of Kansas' most famous and unknown historic sites, uncovering stories that have been told or have yet to be spoken. On this episode of Legends of Kansas, I toured Cherryville Museum. To find the secrets that are hidden within, we talked with Crystal Harper, the curator at Cherryville Museum, who gave us a lengthy tour.
I'm Crystal Harper. I'm president of the museum board, and anytime somebody wants to look at it, I show it to them. We're open on Sunday afternoons during the summertime, from March until October. The rest of the time we're closed, but I show it anytime. When those people, when she died, this Opal Conduit Evans died, her husband said that he would give these things to the museum if they would, or to the town if they'd start a museum. So people got together and they started a museum. And a lot of this stuff in this room was stuff that they gave to the museum. And we have some artists in Cherryville too. Tom Porter, he was one of our art people, and Violet Baker was another one. And I do some painting, but not as good as them. And these plates here, I thought they were very interesting because they tell about the start of the nation. Cherryville used to be a good-sized town. It was over 8,000 people, and it's working its way up to 2,000. But we got down to about 1,500. Carrie Nation stayed overnight in one of our hotels, and someone said that Jesse James stayed overnight. He slept on the porch of one of our hotels. And there's another one of Violet Baker's paintings. She was a teacher, and she taught at that school. And this building used to be the telephone office. When Mother would come in and pay her bills, I'd go step in that door over there and watch the operators plugging in. And there's a lot of different stories about the Benders and what happened to them. But the one that I feel like is true, Rita Younger, she got on the Unsolved Mysteries computer with some lady in Michigan, and this lady claimed to be the baby, she was the great-granddaughter of this baby. So anyway, this lady sent the pictures to Rita. Rita gave them to the museum, and we made some. She sent just the little tintype pictures. And then we had these made off of the tintype pictures. Supposedly, Kate, after she moved up there, she became a respectable person. What happened to John Jr., I don't know, but they did have a baby, apparently. And anyway, this lady was, Rita said she was a very angry sounding lady. And because people would find out who she was, and they would harass her, and they'd have to move around different places. And so she didn't want to throw these pictures away, but she didn't want her grandchildren getting them. So that's how Rita got a hold of them. So anyway, I believe that story. And this is the grave of, Rita even went up there. And that's the grave of Kate Bender. Supposedly they were brother and sister, but I question that, because back then children were stolen, and I wonder if John Jr. and Kate both were stolen from their parents, or perhaps their parents were the victims of some of the Benders. And but these are the actual hammers that they used. And then he passed them on to this gentleman, and he gave them to Cherryville. Now, Cherryville used to have a Bender Museum downtown, but some of the people complained because it was a fire hazard downtown like that. And so they had to get rid of it. It's a robe of one of the doctors. You know, the doctors used to have horse and buggies and they'd put the robes over their laps. We used to have a cigar factory too. There's some things they made cigars with. For a little town, Cherryville's got several famous people. Vivian Vance grew up here in Cherryville. And the guy that wrote the Pledge of Allegiance, he grew up in Cherryville too. There was another movie star, Louise Brooks. She was a silent film star, and she was from Cherryville too. And this display is from, there was some missionaries in China, and they gave the museum some of the things that they collected.
In the 1870s, the Bender family settled in Kansas, near the Great Osage Trail, over which innumerable travelers passed on their way to settle the West. The older Bender, called Pa, made a claim for 160 acres in which is now Labette County. His son John, sometimes called Thomas, claimed a smaller parcel that adjoined Pa's land but never lived on or worked it. The Benders also included Ma and a daughter named Kate. Ma and Pa spoke mostly German, and their English was so heavily accented that no one understood them. The family built a one-room house near the Osage Trail with a curtain that divided the house into two areas. The front area was a public inn and store, and the family's quarters were in the back. Travelers on the trail were welcome to refresh themselves with a meal and resupply their wagons with liquor, tobacco, horse feed, black powder, and food from the Bender home, and they often spent the night. Kate was the most outgoing of the Benders and advertised herself as a fortune teller and healer. It was rumored that she and her mother practiced witchcraft. Kate was attractive, and her psychic abilities drew extra customers to the inn when she wasn't traveling to give lectures on spiritualism and holding healing service. In 1872, George Lochner and his infant daughter left Independence, Kansas to settle in Iowa after the death of his wife. They never arrived. Dr. William York went looking for them, following the Osage Trail. He questioned people all the way to Fort Scott, but then Dr. York himself disappeared on his way back to Independence. And that was the turning point in the story. Dr. York had two powerful brothers who were determined to find out what happened: Colonel Ed York and Kansas Senator Alexander York. On March 28, 1873, Colonel York arrived at the Bender's Inn with a Mr. Johnson, explained to him that his brother had gone missing and asked if they had seen him. They admitted Dr. York had stayed with them and suggested the possibility that he had run into trouble with Indians. Colonel York agreed that this was possible and remained for dinner. York agreed that all was possible and ate a hearty dinner at the Bender's home. Later on that night, while sitting alone in the front room, he happened to notice something glittering underneath one of the beds. He pulled the object out and saw it was a locket on a gold chain. He opened it and was startled to see the faces of his brother's wife and daughter inside. He recognized the locket then as a trinket that his brother wore on his watch chain. He quickly realized that the inn might have been the last place that his brother had been alive. York was in the front part of the inn by himself, and so quietly he slipped out of the front door. Around the same time, neighboring communities began to make accusations that Osage community was responsible for the disappearances, and a meeting was arranged by the Osage Township and the Harmony Grove Schoolhouse. The meeting was attended by 75 locals, including Colonel York and both Pa and John Bender. After discussing the appearances, including that of William York, it was agreed that a search warrant would be obtained to search every homestead between Big Hill Creek and Drum Creek. Despite York's strong suspicions regarding the Benders since his visit several weeks earlier, no one had watched them, and it was not noticed for several days that they had fled. 3 days after the township meeting, Billy Toll was driving past the Bender property when he noticed that the inn was abandoned and the farm animals were unfed. Toll reported the fact to the township trustee, but because of inclement weather, several days lapsed before the abandonment could be investigated. The township trustee called for volunteers, and several hundred turned out to form a search party that included Colonel York. When the party arrived at the inn, they found the cabin empty of food, clothing, and personal possessions. A bad odor was noticed and traced to a trapdoor underneath a bed, nailed shut. After opening the trap, the empty room beneath, 6 feet deep and 7 feet square at the top by 3 feet square at the bottom, was found to have clotted blood on the floor. The stone slab was broken up with sledgehammers, but no bodies were found. It was determined that the smell was from blood that had soaked into the soil. The men then physically lifted the cabin and moved it to the side so they could dig under it, but no bodies were found. They then began to probe the ground around the cabin with a metal rod, especially in the disturbed soil of the vegetable garden orchard, where Dr. York's body was found later that evening, buried face down with his feet barely below the surface. The probing continued until midnight, when another 9 suspected grave sites marked before the men were satisfied they had found them all and retired for the night. Digging resumed the following morning. Another 8 bodies were found in 7 of the 9 suspected graves, while 1 was found in the well, along with a number of body parts. All but 1 had their heads bashed in with a hammer and their throats cut. It was reported in the newspapers that they all had been indecently mutilated. The body of a young girl was found with no injuries. Words of the murder spread quickly. More than 3,000 people, including reporters from far away as New York City and Chicago, visited the site. The Bender cabin was destroyed by souvenir hunters who took everything, including the bricks that lined the cellar and the stoves that lined the wall. State Senator Alexander York offered a $1,000 reward for the Bender's family arrest, which would amount to $19,992 as of 2017. On May 17th, Kansas Governor Thomas A. Osborne offered a $2,000 reward, which is $39,983 as of 2017, reward for the apprehension of all 4. Now, the killing method was quite interesting for the Benders. The danger of dining with the Benders came when seated with your back to the canvas wall. Some travelers complained of hearing strange sounds from behind the curtain while they ate. They didn't realize what would be coming their way for dessert. Kate would also place her spiritual clients with their backs to the curtain. In the darkened room, she made all sorts of strange manifestations appear, usually with her family's earthly assistance, and she managed to keep the sitter transfixed in place for an extended period of time. However, some of the sitters became unnerved with their backs against the canvas wall. One man was so scared they insisted on being moved to another seat. Kate became so angry with him that he stayed put. Finally, though, after hearing what he believed were otherworldly whispers on the other side of the sheet, he jumped up and ran from the inn. Most travelers were not so discerning, though. If a diner, overnight guest, or a seance participant appeared to be wealthy, he was given a seat of honor with his back to the curtain. While Kate distracted him, Old Man Bender or his son would sneak up to the curtain with a sledgehammer.
In there and set him down in front of this curtain, and someone would stand behind the curtain and conk him on the head.
The body was then dragged back beneath the canvas and stripped. A trap door that led to an earthen cellar was opened, and the body was dumped below until it could be buried somewhere on the prairie. A favorite burial ground was apparently an orchard that was located on the property, or in the vegetable garden or tomato garden. Later investigations revealed that none of the Benders were actually named Bender, and the only ones that were related were Ma and her daughter Kate. Pa was born John Flinkinger around 1810 in either Germany or the Netherlands. Mom Bender was born Almira Meek, and her daughter Kate was born Eliza Griffith. John Bender Jr.'s real name was John Gebhardt, and many who knew them in Kansas said he was Kate's husband instead of her brother.
This concludes our episode of Legends of Kansas. See you next time.